Today we would like to touch three different topics, different in naming, not different in meaning. And namely, these three topics will be concepts, Dharma, and grace. When the time comes, we will give the definition or what we mean by that for each word. So let us start with concepts. When we speak about concepts, we generally mean thought, an aggregate of that what is meant by a certain word. Now, the important thing, the reason why we start with concept before Dharma is because there are concepts that we still use in our everyday life. And of course, normal concepts are a really good thing because we say deja vu and everybody knows what we speak about. We say goosebumps and we know what we mean. Now, the reason why it's important to speak about concepts is because as time has passed, several concepts remained in our language, but what they mean changed. And this is what we call a misconcept. Now we can start with an example of a concept. We can say the word soul, for example, which originally should mean the individualized form of the spirit beyond creation, that which is actually one with everything, that which is the image of the source, which is indeed not different from source. But nowadays, most of the people say that it hurts their soul and they feel it in their soul. And obviously, we already speak about the mind which is the thought processes and the aggregate of thought and emotion. And at this moment, we immediately use one word, but we mean something else by it. And this is because the word stayed the same, the meaning changed. And of course, this is mainly connected to the experience, because back in those days when the word soul was used wisely and didn't mean the body or the mind, it was a living reality. And that is the point of concepts, that those were used as a reference to a living reality. And what we mean by living reality is that it's not because we remember that we know something, it is because we are constantly in the experience of a certain phenomenon. And then if somebody asks us about something, we don't start to run around and start to try to remember what that thing was, but we just go deep and we see the experience and then we testify what we see. That is the living experience versus the conceptualized man. And indeed, a lot of suffering of human existence comes from the over-conceptualizing certain phenomenon. For example, a lot of times people use the word God or creator, and the moment when the concept of God becomes mixed together with giving punishment and giving rewards, immediately we don't speak about that which is the source of creation, which we can label as the silent witness, that which prevails everything and is impersonal to everything as it is indeed everything. So these are the concepts that became corrupted over time, and this is why it's indeed important to be aware of the words we use, because as we know, the words we speak up may become our reality, and in a way this is our responsibility of knowing certain concepts. And indeed, it's not important to use concepts, because the moment you just close your eyes and you see the experience, there's no need to speak about things. It is mainly because of the human experience, and as they always say, a man of self-realization, a man that goes to know the truth, shall always water the soil of humanity with the self-knowledge. And therefore we speak about certain concepts, because as long as one expresses something in this human experience, there is a word attached to it, and as the word cannot denote 100% the thing that it denotes, I mean, even if I say the word soul, it still cannot mean the soul, as it is just a word denoting it. But we can always try to express best our experiences, so that even human suffering will be um, minimized, as knowing that it is the mind that suffers and at most the body, but the soul is that which is the silent healing, the silent witness of all dualities of this world. Now, let us move on to the second point of this conversation, which is, we may say, the main body of the conversation, so that even the speech of concepts will be understood better. Now, the word Dharma means in Sanskrit and in most of the Indian languages universal truth, universal teaching, and righteousness. Now, mainly the tradition of Buddha uses this word as denoting the sum of all teachings that the Buddha gave, but nevertheless, all the universal teachings, as any teaching is universal, and we will speak about this in a few moments, can be called the Dharma. And let us now start to speak about what are dharmas and what are their use in everyday human experience and beyond. Now, as we have said, dharma means universal truth. Now, let us say some words regarding this. What should universal truth, universal teaching mean? Now, universal teaching, it should mean that it is the same 10,000 years ago and in 10,000 years. So it doesn't change over time. And this is indeed very important, because it means that if somebody said something that we hold that is true in a universal sense, then that will be accurate even in a million years. And why is this important is mainly because of spiritual practices. For some of you who know the word sadhana, which means spiritual practice, certain masters and messengers over time have come and spoke about different techniques of experiencing the divine, being one with the divine, as what we call self-realization. And the important thing regarding these is that the moment they preached it, the moment they revealed it, and it worked, it means that if it works, it will work even now or tomorrow, or whenever a human being decides to take a spiritual practice, certain types of meditation we mean, or any kind of practice. For example, even serving other people in a way is a spiritual practice. So the point is that these dharmas, these teachings, are universal, meaning that they don't lose their authority over the time. They are not corrupted by time, we may say. Now, another thing, you may ask the question, how do we know that they don't lose their authority? Now, we know this because we can see from experience that there have been people attaining self-realization to the path of the Buddha, for example. Even then and even now it happens. So our conclusion may as well be that these things don't change. Of course, it may happen that certain practices, certain types of meditations become outdated, and what we mean by that is not that they don't work. What we mean by that is that certain new types of meditations come that are more adequate, more fruitful for certain times, because we know that as time changes and as the our galaxy moves into different positions in the universe, certain times also change on the planet, because we had middle age, now we have this age that is going. So we know that different types of meditation and different types of techniques are more useful in certain ages, but it of course doesn't mean that not all of them are useful. Now, moving on, there is another concept that is used for these teachings, which is called omnipresence. Now, omnipresence is always used a lot of times, but essentially what it means is that it is the same in this point and in any other point in the universe. It also means that if I do meditation here and it works for me, it must work for anyone else, being on the moon, on the sun, on any kind of place in the universe. It is the same. We say that it is homogeneous. It is not dualistic. It means that it is always the same, and of course things that are not dualistic don't change over time, because the only things that are affected by time are the things that were created and at their end they always are going to be destroyed. And then the conclusion of ours regarding dharmas is that they are not created, nor are they destroyed. Now, for example, a certain type of dharma we may speak about to understand this is how, for example, gravity works. Even though now we say it's science and it's not spiritual, the fact is that we say scientific things are those things for which we have formulas, we have theorems, we have proofs in scientific manner, and therefore we say that gravity is scientific. Nevertheless, gravity works the same way here and on the other part of the universe. Now, of course, it depends very much on the planet and on the star that we speak about, but the fundamental thing that certain big objects are going to pull towards themselves other objects, it is a phenomenon that can be seen all around the universe. So this is one kind of dharma, we may say. It is how things works. We may say that these are the basis of creation. These are the universal formulas, we may say, that make this whole existence work. Even spiritual practice, therefore, is scientific, because there are certain, not written formulas, but conscious formulas. For example, doing a certain breath technique that, for example, pranayama, it simply affects the body in a certain way. There is no other way that kind of breath technique can do anything else. Even though there are different kinds of forms. For example, a male form is different from a feminine form, but the way this form is built up, the very basis, the very bricks from which is built up is the same kind of DNA, same kind of practices that can be done. Even though we may say that there are a lot of personalities out there, it still doesn't matter, because even personality is a consequence of mind stuff, thought processes, and all that aggregate. And therefore, no matter what kind of personality or any kind of quality being has, the fact is that the mind always works the same way. For example, to give a very simple understanding about this, if a being takes on a certain identity of being identified with something, it will try to protect it no matter what. If somebody decides that they are of this nation or that nation and they jump deep into that, the conclusion will be that they will try to defend that identity no matter what. And this is just a typical way how the human mind works. And therefore, we say that there are certain keys that can be put into these locks and to unlock them so that they can go beyond such identities or such thought processes, such emotions. And this is what we mean by omnipresent, that they can always be carried out. And this is how simply things work, we may say. For example, a Dharma, law of nature in our human existence is the presence of duality. We know that in reality, existence is non-dual, but the forms that existence takes on itself or dualistic, such as the positive and negative and the masculine and the feminine. These are just certain qualities that existence appears to take on itself. And these kinds of dualities, that you have protons and electrons, for example, and not only neutrons in the atoms, is another kind of Dharma, that this universe is covered in duality, which sometimes is referred to as an illusion, because as we have already spoken about the oneness of things, existence is existence as I am existence, and everything else is existence. And if one looks upon the reality as such, there aren't any dualities in question, because if everything becomes homogeneous, it will be not sliced in two and get two, because it will be still a homogeneous big existence. But a Dharma regarding this universe is that this is covered in duality. It has its counterparts, and so this is this plane of existence defined. Of course, if we go to certain higher qualities, higher states of existences, such as different astral world or causal worlds that are beyond the physical, they are to a lesser and lesser degree covered in duality. And this is when we say that self-realization is the realization of oneself with everything. That means that the consciousness is no longer covered in the illusions of duality. It means that there's no duality, not even a peck of duality, not even a trace of duality left in the consciousness. And then we say that there are no more states of consciousnesses. It is only the pure consciousness no longer put in any kind of state. So dharmas are omnipresent. And now, for example, a person who knows all the dharmas, we call them a Buddha, for example, or in universal, universally we may say that they are an enlightened being. Now, a very interesting thing that is always said, but is it really understood? Let us check. They say that enlightened beings, and especially it is said about a Buddha, they say that they know all the dharmas. And a conceptualized mind may ask, how can a single being know all the possible knowledge of this world? Now, this quality is named omniscience, which means knowing everything. Now, of course, for a conceptualized mind, this statement that one being knows everything may be hilarious, but if we look upon it in a deeper level, we will see that in fact this is very much possible, and that this is the very basis of everything. Now, we said that dharmas are omnipresent and the Buddhas are omniscient. Now, if omnipresence and omniscience is the same thing, and they are just two different words for the same reality, then we can say that these things are non-different, and a person who is omniscient is omnipresent, and vice versa. That which is omnipresent is omniscient, aka the soul, that which is one with everything. Now look at it. Let's look at it right now. We may say that because the dharmas are all around, and because originally the consciousness is in its enlightened state, it is in perfect oneness with everything, and because we know that dharmas appear because the soul incarnates, we may say that in fact there are no dharmas when there is no creation, because if everything is just a vast nothingness, then there are no things to be known, because then everything is just one big universal self. There is nothing to be known. But as long as there is a certain creation, a certain motion, there are certain dharmas that prevail. And because we know that the soul, the original consciousness, the pure consciousness, is the origin of everything, then it means that when this original consciousness incarnates itself into a form, it means that in fact it just looks upon itself as the dharmas, because we may say that in fact dharmas are the pure consciousness, the righteous way of living. And if we look upon it as such, we clearly see that the incarnated soul, the pure consciousness, in fact has to look upon itself as non-different from oneself. And when the pure consciousness, when the being realizes its oneness with everything through meditation and different techniques, they realize that it is non-different from them. So they just look at something, and there is that intuitive understanding of why this is so. For example, even in human existence, we have examples for that. When a person has depression, most of the human beings near them can say that we know that that being is in depression. Why is it so? Because we, having experienced that state or having seen how it works, we understand the science of it. And when we look upon it, we understand not the reason for it, but the mechanism for it. And then we can say that we know, and we can help them unlock and just go beyond that. The same is with these laws of the universe, because when one just realizes one's unity with everything, then there is really nobody different. There is nothing different from that being. And if we look upon most of the great teachers of the past, we can see, for example, Krishna from 5,000-6,000 years ago. We see that he explains to his disciple how is oneness attained through various possibilities, and he claimed and he expressed his oneness with everything. And at that moment, there is nothing to be known for that certain being, and knowing everything is evident when one has gone beyond knowing and not knowing, because when one is just one with everything, everybody sees oneself, the being sees oneself as an extension. It's called an expansion of oneself. And when one expands to the dimensions of the universe and beyond, then it will be just a clear understanding of this is so and that is so. The same way as we know that if we jump, we will get back to the earth, the same way the being knows, for example, for a Dharma to see more obviously what a Dharma is, for example, is that the moment of death is very decisive on what happens next, because the moment of death is like the blueprint, the footprint of the life that was lived. And for example, to give an example of a Dharma, many people use this notion, the day of judgment, and it is used with trying to get people to fear. But in fact, what the day of judgment means is that at the moment of death, the being has a certain vibration, has a certain quality, for example. And through its qualities, it will be pulled to a certain plane of existence that matches its qualities. This is the day of judgment, and that day is simply the departure from the form, where simply the being is judged not as a personal judgment, rather than a universal energy being matched to a certain other energy that already exists. This is what we call planes of existences. For example, we may call them astral worlds or animal worlds. These are all planes of existences with a certain consciousness. If we look at the animal world, we clearly see that that is way different from ours. Why? Because most of the animals simply don't have a consciousness in a way a human being does. Most of the animals cannot realize that they exist, and that immediately means that in a way they are in a lower plane of existence, as long as we have planes of existences, because simply they do not possess a certain aspect that would help them self-realize. If we go to, for example, an astral world, sometimes they are called heavens, but not to confuse anything with anything, we just call them astral worlds. Since it is a purer word than the human word, immediately follows that self-realization is attained more easily, because there are no such distractions as in this human existence, senses or the prior distraction to a being. But in astral worlds, in most of the astral worlds, there is none of these things that distract the being as much as in the human world. So the higher up we go in this quality ladder, we see that it's easier and easier to get to the self-realization, which has no more qualities as it's one with everything. So this is, for example, one Dharma, the day of judgment, how it's being judged by the qualities of a being to which quality it is pulled, aka the plane of existence. And now we can get to another conclusion concerning dharmas, as we said, for example, about the day of judgment, as it is impersonal. It's not, dharmas are not personal. It means that it's not another being. It's not a subjective phenomenon. It means that these things, as we have said, work always the same. It means that they were not created, nor will they be destroyed, because things that are created are going to be destroyed, and this does not hold for dharmas, for laws of the nature. So impersonal means simply that if I do this breath technique, for example, it will not say that, oh, I don't like you and I will not work for you. It means that if you push the button will be pushed. If the sun, rises, you will see the rays of the sun. This is purely impersonal, as we may say that a chemical reaction happens as it is meant to happen, because it is not personal. It works by its own nature. And this is one major thing about dharmas, that there is no personal mixture in them. And another consequence of impersonal dharmas is that they are not corruptible, and it means simply that just because a being wants it more or less, it will still work the same way. It does not compromised, it's uncompromised. It means that you still have to put the same kind of effort into self-realization as any other being. It means that it's always working. It does not change just because a being believes that it changes. It stays unchanged, and it is there to be understood by the beings. And now let's speak about impersonal for a bit, because we know that it somehow feels cold for a human being when we say impersonal love, for example, because impersonal love is one of the greatest dharmas, that true love is absolutely impersonal. What it means is that it is always there regardless of the things that happen. It means that, for example, if universal love wasn't impersonal, it would mean that if a being, you know, did all the crazy things that can possibly be done, they wouldn't be able to attain enlightenment. But this is not so, because, as for example, the Buddhist scriptures say, Buddha nature, with other words, the possibility of enlightenment, is in any being, in every kind of being, there is the possibility for enlightenment, and it cannot be taken away. With other words, with more devotional words, we may say that the divine love is always there within the consciousness as omnipresent and always present, just waiting to be grasped and understood. It does not change just because the being changes its qualities, because impersonal love is without qualities. It is just there, pure as it is. There is nothing that is mixed with it. There are no personal feelings mixed with it, because the moment personal feelings are mixed with it, it means that there are certain objects, with other words, senses there, because mainly personal love is concerning, I love you because of you're my daughter, you're my father, you're my boyfriend, you're my girlfriend, you are this or that. And of course we may say that we love somebody because they are our daughter, but it doesn't mean that we wouldn't love them if they weren't. It means that any kind of being on the street or in another plane of existence, in the absolute sense, they are all a family member of ours, as we know that existence is homogeneous. It means that just because they believe that they are different, it doesn't mean that they really are. It is called the veil of illusion, that we believe that we are different, but in reality, there is none of that. And that is what we mean by impersonal in general, that it's not mixed with ego feelings, with senses, with desires, with any kind of object. And by object, we don't mean just simply physical objects. We mean overall, even a certain thought is the object of the mind, for example. So this is what we mean by by objects, and in total what we mean by impersonal, the simply pure, unchanging. And because if we want to see the proof why, for example, the Dharma of universal love, divine love, is unchanging, we have seen some reasons why before, but we can say the following, that if universal love would be partial and compromised, it would mean that it enters duality. It would mean that it has ups and downs. And the moment something enters the ups and downs, it means that it is already veiled in dualities. It means that it's not absolute. It is it is relative to something else, because human love is related relatively to hatred, for example. So we have all these pairs of dualities, but when we say impersonal love, there is no more counterpart to it. It is, as we said, omnipresent, and things that are omnipresent cannot have a counterpart, because it would mean that even the counterpart exists in them, so they cannot be different from them. So this is why we say that dharmas are omnipresent, because they hold everything that is to be known within, and that nothing is different from that. And now we may even look at the following thing. Why is Dharma also called righteousness beyond the laws of nature? It is called righteousness because let's look at the duality of good and bad. Now, good and bad are relative to each other because one person may say that this is good, another one may say that that is bad, and it becomes dependent upon the being that experiences it. Now, if we want to go beyond dependencies, because as we see, things that depend on other things cannot be real because it means that they depend on something else. What it means is that if that something else changes, they themselves change. So this is why we have to move to a certain area regarding righteous action, good action and bad action, what is to be done and not to be done, in order not to get confused in goods and bads, because if I say that action is good, another being may come and say, no, that is not good, that is bad. And in order to clearly see what is to be done, if we speak about action, of course, and what is to be avoided, we say righteous action is to be done and non-righteous action is to be avoided. Now, as we see, if we say righteous, it does not exist in the planes of duality. It means that what is a righteous action now will be a righteous action in any time in history, past or future. Now, for example, if we look at the scriptures of humanity, we see that all the scriptures of that have been written about great masters, we see that they stress always about unconditional love, what we call divine love, and also forgiving. And these are the righteous qualities, we may say, that allow oneself to self-realize. Why? Because if somebody has no forgiveness, if somebody has hatred or unresolved things within oneself, it means that they have such qualities in them. It means that they cannot become omnipresent. They cannot feel that they are one with everything, because that certain hatred or unpleasant feeling towards another being immediately lynches them to dualities, because there is, oh, I hate them, oh, I don't hate them, and you can go between these two for a very long time. And if one just gives up all these feelings towards any kind of being, and one ends up in unconditional, impersonal love, from impersonal love, there is just one less step to be made to purely experiencing oneself as the whole basis of creation, if we want to use certain notions. And these are the righteous things, we cannot call them commandments, because they are not things that are said to do this or not to do that, because every situation is unique in its nature. Because, okay, we may say that the same things happen, that somebody robbed somebody else. Of course, from the outside, they are the same things, but we may look upon it, what were the reasons? Why was it going to happen? What are the karmas of the beings involved? What was the reason why all those things happened? And the way we act in certain situations are always dependent on the nature of the situation itself. So this is why, for example, out of the three main yogas, namely the yoga of devotion, or with other words, bhakti yoga, the yoga of knowledge or jnana yoga, and the yoga of action or karma yoga, out of these three, only karma yoga doesn't have do this and don't do that. Bhakti yoga has very well described techniques and methods of how to perform devotion to any kind of path, or Jnana Yoga, the path of devotion. There are very specific methods of how to attain knowledge, how to attain understanding of things. Karma Yoga is how you actually reflect all those things that you know and you have experienced in the human existence on any kind of plane of existence. Because Karma Yoga, or the union of actions, is actually also can free beings, as it is a consequence, because one certainly can know what is the right thing to do or the righteous thing to do when one has already knowledge and understanding about the nature of things. Because indeed, the only reason why people fall into the pitfall is because there is no understanding about the nature of things. What is the nature of a being? What is the nature of the other being? Of course, in reality, there are no natures, but as long as a being believes that it has a nature, it will behave as such, and this is the karma they have, for example. So regarding these yogas, this is another type of dharma, that we may say that every action can be understood by simply knowing the quality, the dance of qualities that are present there. And if one really understands how qualities work and how can you neutralize or create another type of quality out of another quality, then one knows how to do righteous action, because righteousness mainly can be seen in performance, because righteous, one sitting cannot be said if it's righteous or not. It's mainly the actions that will show how much they understood the self, or what we call the soul. Because if one has understood what is the self and what really means the oneness with everything, then certainly there are no things that they can make mistake in. For example, there is this even statement that absolutely enlightened beings don't make mistakes. And the proof for that is simply what we have already spoken about, that knowing oneself as everything, one will know what is to be done, what is to be avoided, and that is what we call the golden way of life. Don't do anything to others that you don't want to be done onto oneself. This very famous saying, and the proof is now here, the explanation to it, because indeed one is one with everything, then there is nothing that is not done to oneself. And this is what we call Dharma, or righteousness, that action that purifies the mind and helps the being liberate, that we can call righteous action, and is beyond good and bad. Because, for example, we may have a scenario when, and we will give very powerful examples so that it's understood well. For example, there's a scenario of it has happened in the past regarding beings, divine beings coming and going, that there is a certain war going on. And now there might be action that must be performed when something like this breaks out. And of course, we don't speak about this time of the planet. We speak about darker times of the planet. And there were sometimes moments when a certain arrow had to be shot, a certain word had to be said out. And now we may say that that was wrong. But as long as something is to be done, then there are no more right and wrong things. Right and wrong are for those who don't understand clearly what is to be done, because if there's something to be done, what is even the reason to name it good or bad, rather than just going for it and understanding how to do it? Regarding Karma Yoga, we already have another video, so if you would like to listen to that, you will find it on the channel. So we have seen concepts and several things regarding dharmas, And as we said, many dharmas are seen in practice. Now we can speak about one very practical thing right now, as we are in the midst of the virus and everything. It is called grace. Now, what we mean by grace is like a lubricant for a fruitful life. What it means is that, for example, whenever such a situation arises, for example, with the virus right now, but we may speak universally, any kind of situation pops up, one thing that can be simply done, of course, we cannot say that, oh, it doesn't exist, let's just move forward, because it means that there is something that shows itself and then you just turn your face away. It means that you don't recognize that that is a great possibility for self-realization and going further on the path to get to the final goal. So, for example, to give a very practical usage, here we have this virus, for example, and you see that most of the people are bewildered and people are crazy about it, and some even say that this is the end of the world and what not. But the very best thing that really can be done is to see that it is there, to acknowledge and to realize that that is there. It doesn't mean that one has to have any kind of reaction, just simply seeing that it is there and taking, for example, the easiest things to be done, or to be cautious, where you go and what you do. These are the very first thing that can be done. But beyond that, to simply one thing to do for other human beings, if we are absolutely well with everything, not necessarily healthy, but well with everything, is just to reflect our wellness, our sight of perfection to those who are not well with it. It can be done through words, as we do it, for example, right now, or it can be done by simply meditating, visualizing a certain group of people, simply receiving the reflection of wellness from our consciousness. So, in fact, these graceful actions, to take it easy, doesn't mean that we don't take it seriously. It means that we know that in reality this plane of existence is not so real. Nevertheless, because we have a sweetness of emotion, we play and we just enjoy being one with everything and witnessing everything as it is. So having this sweetness of emotion, and we can call it in fact grace, just to play with all these situations as a child would play in the sand. And if we can just play as a child with all these things, again, even a child takes seriously building a castle out of sand. But it doesn't mean that they will feel bad the next day if they know that they have to leave their castle in the sand, and most likely the next day they will not find it anymore. They just say, okay, I will build another one. And this is the way they look upon things, and this is why they are blissful, because for them there are no things that aren't blissful, because they just play on with their days and just simply look upon everything as a possibility to enjoy, because even harder times on planet can be just looked upon as a very great possibility, as sometimes they say the gate to perfection just opens up, because one can perform such an action, one can see the reality of things, one can see how to take others' hands, other beings' hands, and just raise them to the position when they are not bewildered just because certain things happen. And of course, we know that there are certain people who pass away because of these things. What again we can do is to reflect our understanding of the nature of things to those that feel that have a loss. Because in reality, we know that most of the people who, for example, leave their form during this virus, it is for them it was known that most likely they will live at this moment of the planet. And if we look at the grander picture, we see that most likely they wanted to live so that they can come up fresh and young, so that they can continue to purify themselves, to create righteousness in their consciousness, so that they can go for it. And with their departure, the loss in the family may create the possibility to look deeper into the nature of things, to understand it. So in fact, this is a win-to-win situation. It has always been a win-to-win situation. It is only the human being that doesn't see the possibility to rise and to go further with it. Because if you see every moment, every breath, every step as a possibility of perfection, a possibility of self-realization, then there is really not much that can hold back that being from really seeing that one is one with the divine, and that there are no differences in the ultimate sense between oneself and the rest of existence. So this is what we call grace, this being fine, being not having weight on oneself, just simply being, we may even say that this is being blissful, is being joyous, ecstatic, just handling everything, because we know that in fact we witness all the creation. So we know that whatever may be, what we are, namely the self, is not changed. It will stay the same, consciousness, existence, and bliss, now and forevermore. So if we can show humanity the righteous way of handling things with impersonal love and impersonal understanding, then these are indeed just a blessing for humanity, not as people think that humanity is cursed and right now they are punished. I have not seen, or few times have I seen, greater possibilities to rise up and show righteousness, Dharma, universal knowledge than these times. Because in peace, you may see that everybody is so wise and they believe that they know everything. And when such a crisis comes, people are go crazy and they don't even know who they are anymore. But this is the best time to shine up and say, this is it, this is how to handle it. Because there have been viruses, and there might still be viruses even after this. So there is no point in such reactions or any kind of reactions than just simply looking at it and, putting our hands together as we bow down to everything, because we realize that everything is the divine, ourselves included. Then simply we just bow down to everything. And at that moment, when you can bow down to everything, what is the thing that can make you feel unpleasant? There are only things that return and reunite in existence, consciousness, and bliss, and so shall it be.